Stolen light, I always believed that art was a language only honesty could speak. But honesty, like paint, is easy to dilute. My sister Clara had always known how to stand in light that wasn't hers. From the time we were children, she would lean into my sketches, my color studies, my unfinished canvases, and ask innocent questions. Why this tone? Why that face? Her curiosity felt flattering back then. I thought she was learning. I didn't realize she was taking notes. When I was 24, I spent a year alone in a tiny apartment that smelled of turpentine and coffee grounds. The walls were stacked with canvases, portraits of women who looked like they'd lived 100 lives, their faces carved from memory and pain. Each one felt like confession, my own therapy in oils and shadows. Clara would visit sometimes, trailing perfume and confidence. She was 4 years older, magnetic, someone who could talk her way into or out of anything. She'd call me the serious one, the artist, the dreamer, in that half-teasing tone that always hid something sharper underneath. When she asked to borrow a few pieces for a portfolio review, I didn't hesitate. She said she wanted advice from a gallery contact. I wanted to believe she believed in me. Weeks later, she stopped replying to my calls. A friend from art school sent me a link one night, a casual, "Hey, is this you?" message. I opened it, and there they were. My paintings, my brushwork, my palette, my faces. But beneath them, another name glowed in gold serif letters, Clara Delaney. She'd titled the collection Silent Women. Critics called it revolutionary, intimate, and profoundly feminine. Galleries booked her across the country. My art, my women, hung under her name, their stories rewritten by her charm. I confronted her once, shaking, tears burning behind my eyes. She laughed softly, the way she used to when I lost a chess match as a child. "Oh, darling," she said, "art doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to whoever makes people feel." She was good with words, always had been, but her smile trembled when I whispered, "I made them feel first." She turned away then, already halfway out the door. The first month after that, I couldn't paint. My brushes felt foreign, my hands stiff. But then, something started to form in the silence. Not grief, but clarity. If she could steal my art, then I could take it back. Not by chasing her, but by showing the world what the truth looked like when it bled onto canvas. I began sketching again, quietly, methodically. The new pieces weren't portraits anymore. They were confrontations. Each one a reflection of what fame does to a thief. A face half lit, half shadowed. A woman smiling while drowning. A sister framed by her own lies. I called the series Inheritance. It would take a year to finish. And when I was done, it would ruin her. Not with scandal, but with the unbearable weight of truth disguised as beauty. Because that's what art really is. Not escape, but exposure. For months I lived like a ghost inside my studio. Day blurred into night, and the rhythm of my brush became the only sound that mattered. I didn't post on social media. I didn't go to Clara's shows. I didn't even speak her name aloud. But she was there, in every line, every stroke, every whisper of paint. Her face haunted the canvas like an unfinished confession. The series came together in fragments at first. The first painting, the borrower, showed two women sitting across from each other, their hands mirroring one another's pose. One held a brush, the other a mask. The mask's surface was still wet, its paint dripping onto the floor like blood. In another, Inheritance, a crowd of faceless critics stood around a woman whose reflection in the mirror didn't match her smile. They weren't subtle. But subtlety wasn't the point anymore. By early spring, I had enough to fill a small gallery. Not one of the big names that Clara courted, but a quiet space run by people who still believed in art for its own sake. The curator, Naomi, had once been one of my mentors. She looked at the first few pieces, and her eyes softened with something between pain and admiration. "These are raw," she said, "like you've been through something and came out holding the truth in your hands." "I suppose I have," I told her. She didn't ask more. Artists rarely need to. The show was scheduled for late June. I called it Inheritance, just like the first piece. By then, Clara's career had exploded. Her face was everywhere. Vogue features, gallery interviews, magazine spreads about the modern feminine voice in art. I didn't need to plan how she'd find out about my show. The art world is small, and envy travels faster than any invitation. Still, I sent one to her door. No note. Just a postcard with the title and date. The night of the exhibition, the gallery glowed with soft amber lights. The walls were white, clean, expectant, waiting to bear witness. People drifted in quietly at first. Art students, collectors, a few critics. They stood before each painting, whispering. Some smiled, others frowned. I watched their faces, not the canvases. When Clara walked in, the air seemed to change. Her dress shimmered under the lights, the same way it had when she accepted her first award. But her eyes froze when she saw the first painting. The borrower. She stood still, reading the placard beneath it. Then she moved on. Inheritance. The thief's mirror, the sister's signature, each one a reflection of her crime, rendered in beauty so intimate that denial would seem obscene. Her hand tightened around her clutch. I could see the calculation behind her eyes, wondering who knew, who guessed, who whispered. Naomi approached, oblivious to the tension. It's remarkable, isn't it? The emotion, the intimacy. She's telling a story that feels personal but also universal. Clara smiled thinly. Yes, she said, very revealing. After that night, whispers began to spread. A critic from the Verge Review called the show a masterclass in emotional truth. Another wrote, "Every canvas seems to hold a secret too heavy to speak." Collectors began to ask questions. Some noticed the uncanny resemblance between the figures in my paintings and those from Clara's celebrated Silent Women series. The symmetry, the colors, the brushstrokes, the shared DNA of the art itself. And then someone finally said it aloud, in a thread on social media that went viral overnight. Did Clara Delaney steal her early work from someone else? Look at the technique, the evolution. It doesn't add up. The art world doesn't forgive easily. By the end of summer, a journalist reached out to me for comment. I didn't confirm or deny anything. I only said sometimes art tells its own truth. You just have to look closely enough. And that was enough. The story spread on its own, unraveling her carefully constructed myth like a loose thread. When I finally saw Clara again, months later, she wasn't luminous anymore. Her voice had softened, her laughter restrained. She said she wanted to talk, and for the first time in years, I agreed, because the final piece in my series wasn't finished yet, and I needed her to sit for it. When Clara called, her voice was soft, uncertain, stripped of its usual performance. "Can we meet?" she asked. Just to talk. Not about the press, not about everything else. Just us. Her tone caught me off guard. Not pleading, not angry, just tired. I hesitated, but the truth was, I'd been waiting for this moment. Not for an apology, but for the final brushstroke in a picture that still felt unfinished. "Come to my studio," I said. "Tomorrow at noon." It rained that morning. The light came through the windows in gray ribbons, damp and heavy. My studio smelled like linseed oil and rainwater, that mixture of earth and purpose I'd always loved. I'd prepared the canvas already, stretched and primed, the last painting of Inheritance. When Clara walked in, I saw immediately that fame had begun to retreat from her face. Her confidence, that glossy public sheen, had cracked in small, quiet places. Her hair was pinned back too tightly, her lipstick uneven. For the first time, she looked human again. "You look good," she said softly, scanning the room. "Busy, I am," I replied. "Sit down." I pointed to the chair near the easel. She hesitated, but obeyed. The silence that settled between us wasn't angry. It was full of ghosts. Years of shared childhood, laughter, betrayal, and stolen breath all sat in the space between strokes of paint. "You've made quite a name for yourself," she said finally, forcing a smile. Everyone's talking about you." "They're talking about the truth," I said. Her eyes flickered. "I didn't mean to—" "Yes, you did." The words cut through the air like the edge of a palette knife. "You meant to. You wanted what I had, because you thought no one would notice the difference. You thought art was just about presentation, about who could smile prettiest in front of a canvas." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence was confession enough. I began to paint. Her outline came first, the delicate slope of her shoulders, the curve of her neck, the hint of tension in her jaw. She sat very still, like a child being scolded in church. I layered the colors slowly, deliberately. The piece wasn't just about her. It was about the weight between us. Love and envy and guilt twisted into something wordless. "You know," I said quietly as I painted, "I used to think art was how I'd save myself. But I was wrong. Art is how I tell the truth when I'm too tired to argue." "Is that what this is?" she asked. "Your version of truth?" "No," I said. Hours passed. The rain stopped. She watched me work, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Occasionally, I caught her studying the canvas with an expression I couldn't quite read. Part admiration, part dread. "You've gotten better," she murmured once. I had to. By the time I stepped back, my hands were trembling. The painting glowed in the fading light. 2 women, sisters, facing each other across a cracked mirror. One half real, one half reflection. Their faces almost identical, but one smiling slightly, the other staring straight ahead, unblinking. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Clara stood slowly and approached the painting. Her eyes traced every line, every shadow. Then she pressed her fingers to her lips, as if trying to hold something in. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "and cruel. Truth usually is." She turned to face me then. For the first time in our lives, we stood eye to eye, not as sisters, not as rivals, but as equals standing inside the wreckage they both created. "You've taken everything from me," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "I just gave everything back to who it belonged to." Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. She left without another word. The sound of the door closing felt final, like a chapter being sealed shut. That night, I finished the last details, the cracks in the mirror, the faint reflection of the easel in the background, the shadow of a brush resting between the 2 women. I signed my name at the bottom, Elena Delaney. The next day, I sent an image of it to the gallery. They decided to feature it at the closing of Inheritance. Its title, The Mirror's Muse. Critics called it devastating, intimate, a love letter and an accusation in one. One reviewer wrote, "It's as though the artist painted her own ghost." And the ghost smiled back. I didn't reply to any of the press. I didn't need to. My truth was already hanging on the wall for the world to see. And somewhere out there, my sister would have to live knowing that her fame had been built on lies and destroyed by beauty she could never replicate. Months passed after the closing of Inheritance. The gallery lights dimmed. The press moved on. And the art world, ever hungry for its next scandal, found a new obsession. But my name stayed. Not loud, not sensational. Steady, like a hum that doesn't fade. Collectors began to speak of my work with reverence, not curiosity. They said I'd captured something uncomfortable and true, that I'd turned pain into language, that I painted not from memory but from the marrow. They didn't know how literal that was. Clara disappeared from the spotlight. Her publicist quit. Her contracts dissolved quietly one by one. The galleries that once courted her politely declined to show her work, offering vague explanations about creative differences and shifts in curatorial direction. I saw her once, months later, in a small cafe near the river. She looked like someone trying to remember who she used to be. No makeup, no entourage, no cameras, just Clara, stirring her coffee slowly. Lost in thought, when she saw me, she smiled faintly, a truce that neither of us had the energy to break. I nodded, and for a moment, just a moment, we were sisters again. That night, I went back to my studio and stood before the mirror's muse. the painting still startled me. It was more honest than I intended, more human than I wanted it to be, because when I painted it, I thought I was exposing her. But now, months later, I saw my own reflection in the cracks. I had become what I needed to be to destroy her. Patient, strategic, unflinching, and in doing so, I'd inherited not just justice, but the same solitude that once haunted her. The gallery offered me another exhibition. They wanted something new, something lighter, they said. A follow-up to Inheritance, maybe something about reconciliation. I smiled politely, but I knew I had nothing of that kind left in me. Art like that doesn't heal. It lingers. Still, I began to paint again. Not portraits this time. Not revenge. Landscapes, gray oceans, empty fields, cities under soft rain. Places where truth didn't have to speak, where silence was enough. Each canvas felt like a confession to myself. That revenge had been necessary, but it had also been the end of something tender in me. One evening, I received a letter, handwritten, no return address. Elena, I saw your painting again. The one with the mirror. I finally understand what you were trying to tell me. You were right. Some of us are born to create. Others are born to imitate. I don't know which one I am anymore. But thank you for showing me the difference. Clara. I sat with that letter for a long time. There was no anger in her words, no bitterness. Just recognition. And maybe, in its own broken way, that was forgiveness. Years later, people still talk about Inheritance. Students write papers about it. Critics call it a study of feminine rivalry and moral reclamation, but none of them ever mention the simplest truth. It was never about rivalry. It was about reclaiming a voice that had been stolen, and learning how to live after you've finally been heard. Sometimes, late at night, I imagine the two of us as children again, painting side by side at our mother's kitchen table, our hands stained with watercolors, our laughter echoing through the old house. Back then, we didn't know that art could wound. We only knew that color could make the world feel alive. And maybe, in some strange way, it still does.